Joining me now live from New York is Caleb Maupin. He's with the International Action Centre. We'll start the first question with him. Caleb, the figures that have been out before the elections were saying that this year we're going to see a lower voter turnout compared to the previous elections. Do you think that up until now that is actually translating on the ground?
Well, I think in 2008 there was an especially large turnout due to the fact that many people were very excited about the election of President Barack Obama and what he meant to African Americans in this country. And many hoped and believed the rhetoric he had about change and believed that he, through taking office, would carry out the changes that millions and millions of Americans desire. However, unfortunately, that has not come about, and there are still, there's still a huge war apparatus in the United States. There's still threats of war. Poverty has increased, and the suffering has gone on. And the alternative in this election, Romney, is even more to the right of Obama. Wants to carry out, even worse policies, even more openly. So this election has not captured the imagination of millions of people in this country. Millions of people do not feel excited about this. They don't feel a need to put their efforts into it because it's not offering them what they need. But here in New York, there was the Hurricane Sandy, and recently we saw that there are things people will put effort into. All across New York, the amount of relief effort that has gone on, been mobilized mainly by Occupy Wall Street and the Committee Against Anti-Asian Violence. They've done amazing things for relief when the government and the Red Cross and other organizations have failed. So people are putting their effort into the political process, but it's not the political process set up by the 1% and the capitalists in order to keep order. It's the process of getting involved in their communities, of fighting against injustice, and of coming to the people's aid when the system fails.
Right. Well, just to remind our viewers about the facts and figures that have been given, I'd just like to tell them over the past 8 elections we're hearing, according to the Census Bureau, an average of 45% of voters didn't vote. Now, in the 2008 election that sent Barack Obama to the White House, 43% of eligible voters stayed at home, which is quite surprising for some. But the US basically has about 234 million people who are able to vote, and of that number, over 100 million of them choose not to vote. Now, Caleb, you referred to some reasons there, but the issue of the election system in the United States is also being raised, and that includes the electoral colleges and the concerns that why is it that this law that prevents presidents from being chosen directly through popular vote is not changing. Now, how strong of an impact do you think this factor in itself has in voter apathy?
Well, I think it has a very, very big impact. For example, if you're a Republican and you reside in New York State, which is largely a Democratic Party stronghold, your vote is basically irrelevant because the majority of voters in New York will vote for the Democratic Party, and so your vote is meaningless. It doesn't get tallied up in the final thing. And if you're a Democrat in Texas, which is a Republican stronghold, again, your vote is pretty much rendered meaningless. But this isn't changing because both of the two parties have been able to utilize the Electoral College for their own ends and been able to hold on to power. And it's been really key. The Electoral College has been very key in keeping down the formation of a strong, third party. I know during the Great Depression there was talk of a farmer labor party, being formed that would represent, the farmers and the working class. There's been pushes for the Green Party, for a strong socialist or communist party. But electorally, these parties have always been weak because of the way the system is set up. And if you compare the voter turnout in the U.S., the U.S. always talks about how democratic it is. But if you compare the voter turnout in the U.S. in the U.S. elections to the voter turnout in places like Venezuela or Iran or Cuba or countries where the U.S. is always claiming are not democratic, you'll see people in those countries tend to vote much more and by much larger numbers. People there are involved in the political process and they're excited about
Caleb,
it. And while the U.S. goes around talking about how democratic it is, most people see they don't really have a say.
Its presidents indirectly through the Electoral College. Now, some say that while most of the or what could be called anti-democratic features of the Constitution are now gone, for instance, when we come to basically in many states, adult citizens having the right to vote, etc., and that we elect senators now directly in the United States. But the fact is, this electoral college system is still in place. The question here, why is this particular part of the Constitution remaining the way it is, while we have seen other reforms made in the Constitution?
I want to thank the other guest for bringing up that quote from Jefferson about how he feared actual democracy and mob rule, because I mean the founders of the United States were very afraid of the common people. The founding fathers were owners of slave plantations. They were the super rich. They were the 1% of that period, and they set up a government to represent their interests. And that was very clear. Originally, one could not even vote in the United States if one did not own property. The situation now where as long as you're 18 years of age you can vote, that took decades, I mean centuries really, of struggle to get that situation. The U.S., I mean, if you look at it, some of the right wing in the United States, they always say we're a republic, not a democracy. And that's the truth. They fear popular rule. They fear popular sovereignty because they know that would result in the loss of power for small elites. The elections are very much controlled by the super rich, and if we want to have democracy, it's going to be a battle. Every struggle, every creation of democratic rights in this country has come through struggle. Whether it's just the right to vote itself, whether it's the right to have freedom of speech, they've always been seeking to take these things away, and they've always been won as the result of popular struggle. So it is very good to point out that the founders of this country certainly didn't believe in democracy.
So we don't run out of time. Kate Maupin, would you agree with the statements there that when it comes to foreign domestic policy, these two differ, especially when it comes to the issues of war? We have in Afghanistan, Iraq, the threats of war against Iran, the situation in Syria, threats of even military action. There we've been hearing a lot of concerns. What's your view?
I think the difference isn't in action, it's in tone. I think if Barack Obama is reelected, we will continue to see the same actions. However, it'll be done with a tone of pretending to be concerned about peace and people's concerns while carrying out war. But if Romney gets in, it will be done in a tone of, militaristic jingoism and, the same thing we saw with Bush. The policies are the same. The fiscal cliff, they're talking about that. After this election's over, they're going to announce that the party's over and they're going to start going after all the social programs in the United States. And they're also going to start stepping up the push for intervention in Syria, and that's whether it's Obama or Romney. Just the question is, what tone of voice are they going to use while they do it? Are they going to be riling up the population into a war drive? Or they're going to be saying, oh, this is just something we have to do, humanitarian intervention. It's what words they use while they carry out the policies. That's the difference.